Oh my gosh, I am so excited for today's episode. I am here with Lisa Campion. She is the author of a bunch of best-selling books, including her newest book, Awakening Your Psychic Abilities. She is a psychic counselor and a Reiki Master Teacher with over 25 years of experience. Lisa has been teaching Reiki for over 25 years and has trained thousands of people, myself included, in Reiki and has done over 15,000 individual sessions. Woo! She has also been the host. She also is the host of the radio show and podcast, The Miracle of Healing. She specializes in training emerging psychics, empaths, and healers so that they can fully step into their gifts since the world needs all the healers that it can get. So true. Lisa, I am so excited that you are here today. Thank
Oh,
you.
thanks, Francine. I'm so excited to have this podcast. It's super cool. I love it. And I'm thrilled to be here today.
So I trained my Reiki with you, I think it was 12 years ago. It was a
Mm.
long time.
Wow.
And
Yeah, you've been doing
uh,
it for a while.
you have been part of my spiritual journey because we met about 15 years ago, and I had had a therapist that did energy work. And I remember the first time she was doing energy work on me, and it felt like she was rubbing my belly. And I was like, okay, this is awkward. Why is this woman touching my belly? And I opened my eyes and she wasn't touching me. And I was like, all right, that shit's cool. I need to know more about that. And that's when I met you and did my Reiki. And then I went to coaching school. And then I went to the Reese Thomas Institute, where you were also a teacher, went through that, and then became a teacher there. So thank you for being part of my journey, for starters.
Oh my gosh, it's so sweet. I love that. And I can't believe it's been that long. Feels like it was just yesterday.
Right? Oh my gosh. So tell the listeners a little bit about your story because you've been psychic for, and we'll talk a little bit more about what psychic even means, but really your whole life. This has been your journey your whole life, right?
Yeah, it totally has it. I started working as a psychic when I was 19, way back in the 80s. And I don't know, just one of those kids. I was born psychic. So I was born in the 60s and I grew up just outside of Boston in a super haunted house. And I was just always seeing things other people weren't. I'm a visual psychic, but I was also hearing things. I was seeing colors around people. I saw angels, I saw shadow people, I saw my room was full of who I called the gray people at night, the ghosts. And I saw amazing things and hard things. And my parents are hippies and Unitarians, bless them. So they didn't like drag me to the church and throw holy water on me like happens to some people when they did. But they were like, "Oh, you have such an imagination." They didn't really know what to make of it. And I spent the first 20 years really looking for the off switch and trying to pretend to be normal in public, which I still don't do a great job of, but I try. And then it was like the new age, it was 80s and the dawn of the new age. And finally I got some real training. And I just started working as a psychic when I was 19. And because that's like, I don't know, you just think you can do stuff when you're 19. So I'm like, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
that. Well, I'm like, why not? And that's what I did, and that's what I've always done. I have never had another job besides. I mean, I went back to school and became a therapist quickly when I was 19, and I started working. I was like, oh shit, I don't actually know anything. I better know how to help people. I'm like, I still have my head mostly at my, you know what. So I went back to school and became a therapist and blended those two together, which was great. And then 25 years ago, I learned Reiki. So it's closer to 40 years just between you and me and the fence post that I've been
She
doing that.
started younger than 19. She was, yeah.
um, and now here we are. And the pandemic shifted my business a lot. I wrote a best-selling book called The Art of Psychic Reiki in 2018. And then the pandemic happened. And mostly these days I write and teach and train, mentor other people who are going through intense psychic openings. So many people are going through psychic openings right now. People who are realizing they're sensitive, they're an empath, and that's part of their purpose. It's not actually meant to torture them, although it feels that way sometimes. So, you know, so I just work with people whose gifts are emerging to help them. And it's really fun and beautiful for me to do that, because I didn't have any help. Like when I was doing it, it was really still really weird. I mean, it's mostly weird now. It's sort of not weird, but when I was doing it, it was totally weird.
Right. Well,
And
it's, I'm experiencing this now with my 17-year-old niece. So, my family doesn't really know what I do. And a few years ago, I was at a place doing card readings, and they were like, "You read cards?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And then the holiday came, and they were like, "Will you read cards for me?" So I read cards. And then every once in a while, my niece would be like, "Well, will you read cards for me?" I said, "Sure." And about 2 months ago, she called me and she was like, "Hey, my friend needs you to do a card reading." And of course, the friend just needed to know if she needed to go back with her ex-boyfriend, right? So,
yes,
they were 19, 18, 19. So I do a card reading, and then my niece goes, "Will you do one for me?" And I looked at the cards and I thought, huh, I, this kid's got some senses. And I was like, "So do you feel things?" And she was like, "Yeah, there's something in my room." Oh, we need to start having conversations, right? So she's starting to feel things, but not really knowing what she was feeling and what to do with it. So I've taught her and her friends how to muscle test using the
right.
body as a pendulum, which is kind of
Cool. Love that.
right. So it's like, so anytime anybody offers you alcohol or drugs, you muscle test and see what it says. But like really using that. But I took her to a metaphysical, circles of wisdom, circles. I took her to circles of wisdom, and she wanted to get a pendulum, and we got some crystals and stuff. But even those, like, she had a reaction, like the energy was so intense. And I was like, all right, we need to back this down. Right. But like she was experiencing this stuff without even having anyone to talk to, and knowing that it was, you know, normal, and that she could create boundaries too.
Yeah, I love working with young people, and it was really fun when my kids were teenage. My kids are all adults now. Like my oldest son is 30, which I can't even believe that. But when they were young, they would bring me all their friends, and the same thing. And I used to love to teach Reiki to teenagers, and I still do sometimes. So I think we go through like a spurt in our psychic ability as we're going through puberty.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
All people do, and then women also do during pregnancy, during menopause, or during these shifty times in our hormones. And I think the young people are coming in more and more psychic every generation. First of all, I think that's just part of the shift in human consciousness, that human consciousness is evolving, and we're evolving as humans, we're opening to that more. I think because there's less stigma around it, like now there's psychics on TV and there's psychics on TikTok, and
Right.
it's just like there's books, and it's way more part of the conversation. Back when I was a kid, in the 60s and 70s, it's like I just knew to be quiet because I didn't want to go to the mental hospital. And that's where they used to put you if you saw angels and talked to dead Uncle Fred.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think there's less, it's not totally gone. And it also really depends on where you live, because we live in New England and it's pretty liberal here, but you
Yeah.
can be down in the Bible Belt and get sort of a different story. But I also think we're doing like more and more people are doing the three gateways: yoga, Reiki, meditation.
Yeah.
And those things, if you do them, tend to open your gifts if you have them, right? So I just think in general, and then there's a lot of people who are doing plant medicine and mushrooms, ayahuasca, really having their psychic opening. And I think one of my specialties is people who are going through this sudden psychic opening. I work with a lot of people who are just like, did something happen, or they had a near-death experience, or somebody in their life died, and their psychic has gone from like 0 to 60 in like 30 seconds, and that's a freak out potential. So I love to sort of step in and help guide people when they're experiencing that.
You talk about was it really open? My mom passed away in 91, and she was sick for about 6 months. And she used to go to a guy in New Hampshire, and every time she went, she felt better. But it wasn't until I was going through my Reiki training with you that I was like, oh my God, my mother was getting Reiki or some form of energy healing. But back in the 90s, nobody was talking about it.
No, it
And
was really weird back then.
yeah.
Like I learned it in 1999. That's when I learned. And it was
Yeah.
still pretty cringy back then. It was still like a weird thing to do.
Yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, she always used to say she was going to this guy and she always came back and felt better. So we never
That's
asked
right.
questions, but because we didn't know, there was no language to ask the questions. And then when I was doing my training, I was like, oh, she was getting healing work. That's
Oh,
so cool.
good for her.
Yeah.
Good.
So let's talk about the difference between intuition, psychic, and mediumship, right?
Right.
Sometimes
Yeah.
people intertwine them, right? And separate them as well.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So, intuition is kind of this is just my definition, my like how I define them. Other people define them in different ways. But I think intuition is that information that we get from inside ourselves. So it's internal, like, and that might be a lot of people experience it as something you feel in your body, or like you get creeped out feeling, you get shivers, you get like whoa, the wiggies in your body. We might have feelings about things like I have a good feeling or a bad feeling about something, or you don't know why you just know, right? Those are kind of the three most common intuition things. And I think actually love the old-fashioned term extrasensory perception because I feel like
Mm.
psychics just learn how to process more sensory data than other people do. Um, so that's intuition. We all have it. Everybody has it. Not everybody listens to it, but everybody has it. And then there's psychic. Now, psychic is when we get information from outside of ourselves. And that's talking to angels, talking to dead Uncle Fred, working with power animals, working with ascended masters. Like we all have a team of spirit guides. Thank God, because it'd be really hard to come down here and deal with planet Earth all by your lonesome. So we come sort of preloaded with these spirit helpers who are here to assist us. And when they're communicating with us, that's psychic information outside yourself. And then mediums are psychics who specialize in talking to dead people. So some people will say, oh, you're a psychic medium. And I'm like, I'm actually not. I'm a soul reader. So my specialty as a psychic is to read people to the level of the soul. I always say I'm not a medium, but mediumship happens. Mediumship happens all the time because sometimes you just have to it's what my clients need in the moment for their healing. But that's the difference. And so mediums or psychics specialize in talking to dead people. Does that make sense, those
Oh,
distinctions?
yeah, 100%. And I always call myself intuitive, right? I definitely am more intuitive. Have I had psychic or mediumship things if I've practiced it? But I was on a call with a client this morning and we were trying to work through something. And I asked a question and she went, oh my God, that's it, right? Like that was, and maybe it came from outside and said, ask this, but like for me, it just was a very natural. And I would say, we talk about the clears and we can talk about that a little bit. Like mine is just a knowing. And for
Yeah.
a long time, that was so hard for me to even establish that it was intuition, right? Because I just know how to read people. I just know, like, it's just a knowing, but that really was my intuition. And it took me a long time because I'm not hearing from outside of me, it was like, is that my brain making it up? Is it me knowing it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think people dismiss that one a lot, which is really too bad because it's super powerful, it's super accurate, it's really handy. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions that you're only psychic if you see something. So, when I lead psychic development programs and things, and people will say, well, I didn't see anything. I didn't get anything. So I didn't see anything. And I really like to change our language into perceive or experience. So I'll ask them, well, what did you perceive? What did you experience? Because those words open us to all of our psychic senses. And, the feelings you have in your body, the emotional, like, I don't know, I just have a good feeling or bad feeling, and the knowing we're so likely to dismiss as just, oh, that's not special. The other thing is
Right.
psychics are special. Like, somehow we have three heads or something. I don't know, like we're like a different breed, than the rest of humanity. And it's not true. Psychic ability is like any ability. It's like musical ability or athletic ability. You have to everyone has some. We were all born with some, and then how much you develop it depends on how much you work it. Like you don't expect to be concert pianist if you don't take lessons and practice. All
Right.
the pro level psychic stats, they've done that. They practice, they've had teachers, they train. and anyone can increase their psychic ability if we do those things, right? And that's kind of what my book, Awakening Your Psychic Ability, is all about, giving people that training, the information, the knowledge. We need to know stuff. So we need to have the right knowledge set. And then we need to practice, practice, practice. And that will, it's like a muscle. You got to kind of take it to the gym and work it out, and then it grows.
Right. And can everyone strengthen that muscle? Like, do you believe
Everyone.
everyone can have it?
Yeah, everyone can. And it's going to be different for people, you know. So I find that people that are more logical, analytical, sort of more left brains people, tend to go with the knowing sense, or they have strong
That
auditory
would be
sense.
me.
Yeah, they have strong. You hear a little voice in your head that
Yeah.
isn't you; it's your guides talking to you.
Yeah.
And then people who are more emotional tend to have more the visual and the feeling, you know.
Mm.
So, but both, they're equally valid. There's no psychic sense that's not worth having. There's no one that's better than the other one. In fact, the visual psychic that's the one everyone thinks they should have, but it's often the most problematic, the most comfortable if you have it, the least accurate. You know, it in a way, it's like a blessing if you have the other ones, because they're just easier to deal with. And
Yeah.
we have to let go of that. Well, everybody has that. It's not special. And it's just common sense. Well, no, actually, no, it's not, you know,
Right. Because not
clearly,
everybody is
because the
common
world,
sense either.
clearly it's not just common sense, because how much common sense do we see in the world at the moment? I don't know.
So when you say you see things, right? So give people an example of what that means. So if somebody was having a session with you, what might
Yeah.
you see in that session?
Well, the first thing I want to just clarify there is, when I say see things, I'm talking about my mind's eye, my
Yes,
inner
thank
eye,
you for
or
clarifying that.
what
Yeah,
my mom used to call my imagination, you know,
right.
my imagination eye. Because although I can and have and do sometimes see things with my physical eyes, I don't enjoy that experience at
Mm.
all. And when I was really little, I was like, no, stop that, time out, like let's not have that happen anymore, because you don't actually want to like see what that like little growly thing that lives under your bed looks like, you know,
Right.
or see it with your real eyes, right? So sometimes we hear things with our real senses, our physical senses, but most of the time we're getting it with our internal sense, if that makes sense. So but what I see is it's a bit like watching like 10 TVs playing behind someone's head, you know, and I have to sort of pay attention to the person that's in front of me, but there's like maybe their ancestors are on one TV, and their angels are on the other TV, and their past lives are playing out on a TV over here, and their futures on a TV here. And like what's happening, I'm a pretty good medical intuitive, so what's happening in their body is also there. And it's like, depending on which questions they ask and where I shift my attention, that information comes forward. But it is a lot like a little movie playing inside my head, if that makes sense.
And I would imagine you're also an empath, right? So
Yeah.
you teach boundaries for empaths, and I would imagine that you turn that on and shut that off when you're working, right? And for those of you listening, I'm air quoting, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't go through life just doing that, right? I would imagine seeing that would drive you
Yeah,
crazy,
would drive
right?
you crazy, right? I would say there's only a few letters difference between psychic and psychotic, right? But, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, so learning how to turn it on and off is one of the most important skills. I think learning how really, really good energy hygiene, and that's the first thing I teach any of my students, empaths, psychic students, you know, Reiki students, is to maintain and protect our own energy. How do we stay grounded? How do we keep our boundaries really firm? How do we let go of energy that we happen to pick up from other people? Because sometimes we do, you know. um, how do we stay grounded, embodied, all of those things? Grounding, clearing, replenishing our lost energy, and protecting ourselves are just the fundamental things we all have to need, and we know. And when we know those and we practice them and we get good at them, we bring them to, you know, you have to do reps on that, you know, to get really good at it. When we do our reps, then a lot of times our psychic opens even more, because now it's safe to open. We have those foundational things that we have. And, you know, I'm just good at doing it. It takes a little bit of discipline every time I go out to shut down. It's kind of like, you know, when you think about the horses that have the blinders,
Yeah.
on. Can't, it's sort of like I have to, I put my psychic blinders on because I'm in Whole Foods buying vegetables and I just don't need to know what everybody else's business is all the time. I don't want to, you don't want me to. Like it's, I'm just here for the vegetables.
Yeah.
Um, and if I can't do it if I'm super tired, if I don't feel well, if I'm vacations are a bit problematic for me because sometimes when I get super relaxed, I can't. And then I'm just like, whoop, I'm like, my boundary gets all wobbly and stuff. So
So it's
I
a
learned,
practice. It
I learned
really
the
is.
hard way not to go on a cruise because that was, oh boy.
Oh. You know, when I was in corporate, I used to pick up other people's energy. And at the time, I didn't know what was happening. All of a sudden, I would just be feeling anxious for no real good reason. And
Yeah.
once I finally learned how to create some boundaries and how to clear my energy, I was like, oh, this actually wasn't mine. But for a long time, I was like, I'm feeling anxious. And then I'd go and cut cords and do whatever I needed to do. And I'd be like, oh, okay, we got to do that more often because you can't keep going feeling everybody else's stuff.
Right. We got to do it every day. And I think like I'd sit in my car and do it before I go into Walmart. Those box stores are killer on us sensitive types, halfway through. If I don't do it, I'm like in Costco, in the back of Costco, like curled up in the fetal position, crying a little bit and be like, I can't remember my name or where I parked my car. Like it's not pretty. So then I do it in the parking lot, doing it between sessions and like
Yeah.
it's just part of my life now. And I think that question you ask, like, is this mine, is one of the best things you can do. Is sort
Yeah.
of if you start feeling funky and weird, or you just get really exhausted, or you get a headache out of the blue. And but it happened to me the first time I realized it. Now we're going back into 1982. It was my freshman year in college. I went to UMass, big giant school, and I was going to this party. It was Friday night. It was like my first house party as a college student. And I went into this house and I sat down next to this guy. He was having a super bad day. He was like crying into his beer and he was like a country western song. My girlfriend broke me and my dog died. Like that. And then all of a sudden I felt like almost like suicidally depressed. I was like,
Ooh.
oh my God, I have to leave. Like I was like, what's wrong with me? Like I'm not like, why can't I be like other people? I was having a good time and now I have to go home. So I got up and I walked out of the house and I turned around. It was just sort of one of those fate moments. I turned around and I saw him through the window, crying into his beer on the sofa. And I felt fine. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't me. It wasn't me, it was him. And then I just absorbed all of his feelings. And as an empath, we don't just notice that, we feel it as if it's our feeling. And that's the big difference.
Yeah, one of the
So,
things that has been happening to me in the last couple of years is when I go into certain, mostly older buildings. Bill and I were in Nashville about 2 years ago, and we were in this old mill that got turned into shops. And I was literally stumbling around shopping. I thought I was hungover from the night before because I just did not feel right. I was like, what is wrong with me? And we were walking up the stairs and we both felt something go by us. And we looked at each other and we were like, let's leave. The minute I got outside, I was fine.
yeah.
But because I'm intuitive and not psychic, like I just am moving along in life, I don't think I need to protect myself because I'm not that. So I'm getting much better because I walk into an American Legion and I can't breathe and I'm gonna puke, and right, like I'm starting to have these visceral responses when I go into certain, especially older building. Like think of an American Legion, all the things that have been I went to a psychic fair there last year and I walked in the building and I looked at the bill, I was like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Like I was like, I had to go into the corner and like protect myself and then be fine. But I'm like, oh yeah, you have to remember this is now something that whatever is opening up, I can feel what's happening in those buildings.
Right. Hospitals are extremely difficult for me. Hospitals, airplanes, but old buildings and I think that's your signal that there's a haunting going on there. So it's either haunted or filled with a lot of residual energy. So residual energy is like the leftover emotional goo and physical pain that we
Right.
slop off. And American Legion, that's bless them, they help veterans. You know what I mean?
Right,
So that building is
exactly.
been full of veterans who are not, they're suffering, they're stressed out or in pain physically. And so that residual energy is something we feel. But also there may be like a ghost feeling. Like I can tell there's a ghost, a restless, uneasy spirit of the dead when I feel vertigo. So I feel vertigo. I feel like this weird metallic taste in my mouth. Like my stomach kind of flips. I get like cold goosebumps. Like it's such a profound physical feeling that
Mm,
every time I feel it, I'm like, oh, there's one here, you know? And I just think maybe now in your life, Francine, it's really good to kind of bubble up before you go anywhere
yeah,
and
I'm
not just
definitely getting
assume
better at
that,
it.
you know, it's going to be hunky dory because it may not be in old hotels, you know, and we just old buildings in general, you know, you don't know what was going on in that old mill before it got converted.
Oh,
And, you
100%,
know,
right?
I love old buildings and I love old hotels. Like you know, one of the most haunted places I ever went to was a castle in Scotland. And it was like, I wasn't expecting it. And there was this like, you know, because I wasn't expecting it because people live in it. It's like still an active
Right.
house. And I was like, oh, there was this one room, and I was like, who was the lady that got murdered here? I asked the guide, and the guide was like, how'd you know that? You know, or the like the courtyard where the dungeon. Why did I go down to the dungeon? I don't know what like how
Mm,
did I not think that was going to be a thing, you know? But like I think it can I think it can sneak up on us because we really never know what happens. It could be on the side of the road. I see more ghosts standing on the side of the road than anywhere else. And I think it's like traffic accidents or,
yeah,
you know, things that where they're just kind of looking for help.
right.
I used to freak my kids out when they were little. I mean, I think I still do, but I used to be driving. I'm like, do you guys see that person standing on the side of the road? Because I'm never sure whether I'm seeing
Well,
a
I was
real
going
person.
to
You
ask,
know,
can you differentiate between it's a ghost and it's a real person?
sometimes I can and sometimes I can't.
Yeah.
You know, so I had conversations with people in cemeteries that I thought were real people. You know what I mean? I like one time I came into my office in and it was like 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and there was a guy sitting in my chair, like in my client chair. And I was like, how did he get in? Did I leave the door open? I was like, what? How'd you get here? You know, it was like ready to call 911. It
Right.
was burglar. And he sort of smiled and sort of faded away, like he faded out. And I was like, he's like, I'm just here because I want to talk to your 9 o'clock client. I'm here to see Megan. She's coming in at 9. I was like, oh, you know, but yeah, so I don't know. You just never know where things happen to people, and we have to be a bit ready for that. Psychic self-defense, you know, is what I
Yeah.
call
So what would you tell or say to somebody who are, there are people that are skeptical about psychics and mediums and right? So I mean, I would imagine you don't try to convince anyone, but like what, or do you? But what
no.
would you say to them that are like, that's not real?
I always say, you know, I totally respect people who are skeptics. Being a skeptic just means you're smart and you're thinking for yourself. And I'm not sure I would believe any of this stuff either, except that it happens to me every single day.
Right.
You know, like I have these experiences that I cannot deny that I've had literally every day of my life since I was born. And I'm not sure if I didn't have that, I would believe it either.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I might keep an open mind, but I wouldn't 100% believe it until maybe it happens. And so that's kind of where I leave it, you know, and I find people don't really, what are you going to say? Like, you know, I'm like, this is my experience and you have a different experience. And that's okay.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I've had conversations with people who don't believe, and I'm like, you can't convince them, right? They have
No,
to experience it themselves. And it's actually fun to see people experience it where they weren't believers before, and then they go, oh, even myself, the first mediumship class I took, I went with a friend, and I was like, I'm not a medium, but the woman teaching, it was like, everyone has it, let's just come.
yeah,
And we did, some exercises ahead of time, and then we all meditated and we were just supposed to blurt whatever came up. And I'm a very brainy person, and my practice was to just blurt. That's really what I was trying to do, not say, okay, that doesn't make sense. So what I got was a horse and a barn. My brain went, you cannot say that. That is freaking stupid, right? So I went, okay, whatever the woman's name was, hey Lisa, I got a barn and a horse. And the woman was like, yes, yes. And my head's going, are you kidding me right now? Like, really? But it was really practice of just trusting, because I had to trust what came through, because it really did mean something to her. She took care of a horse, and when she left, the horse died, and she was really close to the horse, right? That is not something I could have made up. And
Totally. I think what happens there is like our people with that logical, analytical, smart brain, like you were talking about, we have to relax that because it enough to get the information because the information sort of drops into the other side of us, the right side of the brain, the more intuitive side of the brain. And so you have to train yourself to calm down the inner critic, to calm down the part of your brain that wants to analyze. Because as soon as we go into analysis, we shut down the flow, you know? And the first thing that pops into your head is usually right. It's like your first hit on it, your first impression is usually the right one. And then your brain starts making up shit after that. So,
yeah.
you know, relaxing and allowing is sort of like you have to allow the email to fully download before you start
Before you start
interpreting it.
assuming what it says and trying to
Yeah,
interpret it.
but we actually do need both. Because the other part that's really difficult about a lot of psychic stuff is that we often receive it in the form of symbols. Doesn't it's like dreams. They
Yeah.
come doesn't come usually logically, so it comes in the form of symbols, images, and those symbols may not mean anything to you, but they mean something to your client, like you're in your example. So what does that mean to you is a question that's really good to ask. Like I saw a roller coaster. Well, I hate roller coasters. And to me, a roller coaster is like probably the worst form of torture you could put me through. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if I interpreted that, I might be like, it's gonna suck and be, it's gonna be horrible, then you're gonna throw up, And but you might love roller coasters. And
Right.
and then for you, it might be like the most fun you can have.
Right.
So we, taking our own interpretation off of it and just allowing the client to interpret is a big part of the process, especially when we're learning to read for other people.
Yeah, that was such a learning experience for me, because and I've done that a lot. Like when things come in and don't make sense, I'm like, just say it. And oftentimes it means something to the other person. And
Yeah,
I'm trying to make it make sense to me. And I'm like, no, it's not
right.
about you.
It's
It's
not,
about that
yeah,
person. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly right.
How do you think TV psychics and mediums have helped or hindered um the I'm gonna say the industry, if you will?
I think it's mostly helped. And I think that's because it's opened a conversation, it's normalized it, it's, um, created some more credibility and just it used to be something that you could never talk about. And at least now we can talk about it for the most part.
Yeah.
So I think there's mostly good there. I do think there are certainly scammers and charlatans, and that's been a big part of why people don't trust psychics is because forever there's been people who take advantage of that. And you know there still are scammers and psychic hotlines and things that are just there to take your money and take advantage of people that are suffering. So I think that's a problem. And then I also think that, like, if you got your full education on how to be a psychic and the practices used for by watching paranormal TV, you'd be in big, big trouble.
Mm.
Because the most of the practices they use are not safe, and they're on the top of my do not do list. Do not use a Ouija board. Do not take the Ouija board to the abandoned hospital in the middle, on Halloween. Like, do not smoke a lot of weed and take the abandoned, take the Ouija board
Right.
to the hospital. Like, there's a whole list of do not do's. And a lot of times they do those things on paranormal TV because in general, paranormal research is quite boring. There's a lot of like nothing happening. And that doesn't work for TV. So they have
Yeah.
to use kind of provocation and other tools, things like EVPs and spirit boxes make great TV, but they can be very dangerous for newbies. you
Right.
know um uh, you know there those things can attract in spirits. And I think, like, I have a little bit of a beef with paranormal tourism and some of the, like, I live 10 minutes from the Lizzie Borden house in Fall River, right?
Okay.
And that place, Lizzie's been gone for a long time, but that place is super haunted because they
Yeah.
just let paranormal group after paranormal group who use these um provoking, or they create portals, and now that place is super haunted.
Mm.
And it's not Lizzie. I think she's long gone, but there's all kinds of stuff that's way worse than her,
Right. Right.
So I think that's sort of, and I think a lot of it, it's like you said, people really want to have their own experience. And if you don't know what you're doing and you don't really believe, it's a little bit like chumming the water and then jumping in to see if sharks are real. I don't believe in sharks. Let's throw a lot of blood in the water.
I love
See
that
what comes out.
analogy.
You know
Right.
what I mean? And,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah. I mean, it, I think it's like if you keep your wits about you and you have some sort of basic um, understanding of how to protect yourself and all the things not to do, which a lot of them we see on those shows. I also like beef a little bit with the ones that are like they're just trying to get a show. There are lots of them who really have a lot of great respect for the humans and the spirits, and they try to really
Mm.
help. I mean, you know, ghosts are not zoo animals that we need to like trap here for our entertainment. I think that's kind of twisted. Um, we're supposed to help people,
Right.
and and as long I think like as we're doing that, I really like Kindred Spirits with Amy Burney. She's a local girl from, she lives in Newport, and she's often, they really care. They're really trying to help both the spirits. They're respectful,
Yeah.
and helpful. And I don't like the, you know, let's run around and have a show and, you know, make crazy shit up. I don't know. So I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. What do you think about it,
Yeah.
Francine?
Well, I feel like same, right? Like the people stopping people in the supermarket. Like I think I'm a coach, right? Like I don't coach without consent. I don't think you bring people's dead people through without consent as well, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like if somebody wants to participate, but like I don't watch what's her name, the Long Island woman there. Like
Yeah.
that feels showy to me. And then
Yeah,
there are other people.
it's not even like that because the truth is they've rehearsed it. Everyone signed 15
Right.
consent forms and waivers, and it just looks spontaneous. But that idea that you can do what I call the psychic hit and run, you
Yeah.
just walk up to some rando and give them psychic information without their permission is extremely unethical.
Right. It just doesn't feel
You
right.
know?
But there are some that like Tyler Henry, I think he's
Oh, he's the
adorable.
real
And
deal.
like, that he's doing it because it's like similar to you. He doesn't have a choice. This is what he's meant to do,
Yeah.
right? He's got a new show now on Netflix. I happened to catch an episode last week. That's why he popped into my
He's
head.
great. But I
Yeah.
want to send it, I want to call him and give him my psychic self-defense and, like energy clearing techniques as he gets really sick. He
Yeah.
gets really like, he's quite ill a lot of times and can't get out of bed for days after a reading. And I'm not sure he knows how to manage his energy, although
Right.
his gift is extraordinary.
Yeah, I was in a mediumship class a few years ago, and one woman came into the class and she was bragging how after the last class she was in, she brought somebody's dad home with her. And I was like, I don't like that state, like that was from ego,
Yeah.
right? Like, because it was like a cool party trick. Right. And
Right.
she was like, oh my God, he still was with me. And I was like, oh yeah, no, 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 no. That there needs to be an on and an off. And that's ego when you're doing it from that place.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think so. And not also the idea of helping people, like being
Yeah.
of service, or ethics. Ethics is there's a lot of I've done a lot of cleanup jobs on people who have like been run over by psychics with terrible ethics, and
Mm,
just tell them, when they're gonna die, or tell them your husband's cheating on you, or oh, I love this one. You've got cancer, but the doctors will never find it. What a mind screw,
wow.
you know? So even when the doctor said she didn't have cancer, she didn't believe it. And what happens if you believe something deep enough, your body is going to be like, oh, we've got cancer now. Okay, I guess we got to make that happen.
Right, right.
Like we have to be so careful about the seeds we plant in people's minds, especially like I combine psychic with Reiki that I'm always doing that, the energy work while I'm doing it. So that person's in a hypnotic state, in a very relaxed hypnotic state, very programmable. So I think we have to be so careful about the power of our words and the seeds we plant. Um, you know, there's that's the ethical considerations.
What are some tips that people can like to give people to find if they're working with somebody who's ethical versus not ethical?
I think getting referrals is a really good idea. Like make sure you get referrals, ask around and find out who's good. And you can always Google them and see if there's a lot of complaints. What are their Google reviews? Like, Google or Yelp reviews. Do they have testimonials on their sites? Are they, it's sort of obvious. Like I talked to this one woman, she was in a really vulnerable state, and she's like, she's like, I cheated on you, Lisa. I went to another psychic. I went to this, psychic in a tea room in Cape Cod. And she's like, the woman said I had a curse. Well, so the psychic told her she had a curse, and that it was going to cost her $10,000 to clear it.
Wow.
And if she didn't clear it, one of her children was going to die. And it had to be cash, and she couldn't tell her husband.
Wow.
It wouldn't work. And I was like, you called the cops, right? Like, you didn't believe her and you called the cops, right? And she's like, yeah. She's like, even I wasn't stupid enough in the state she was in to understand that that was a scam. So I think it's like, psychics who are offering you something that's impossible or something that's, you know, fear-based,
Yeah.
like, is really a red flag too.
Well, and I think the biggest thing too, like, and I remember this from healing school, we're not God, right? Like, even if you sense something, is it really your place to share that information? And yeah, I mean, $10,000 to remove a curse. Wow, that's a
Right.
pretty good scam.
I mean, the best psychics only write 80% of the time on their best day, you
Yeah,
know? And really as a psychic, all I can see are probabilities, possibilities, potentials. Nothing is set in stone. So much depends on our choices, our free will. And so like my goal is to empower people to make their own choices, not really to tell them what to do. Um, and maybe like unpack like why that's difficult, or give them some information from the spirit realm that sort of fills in the picture for them a little bit. So I think, yeah, we got to be real careful, um and not to give our power away,
yeah.
and even like I've seen people do that with tarot cards or Ouija boards or the pendulum. Like if you start having to ask your pendulum like whether you should have Chinese or pizza for dinner, you've got a problem. Like don't do that. Like maintain your sovereignty at all times.
Right.
So like your personal power. And I've seen also people do like really crazy, pretty dumb things because the spirit told them to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, who are you talking to? And are you sure that's my Archangel Michael? Because he would never say that. And
Right.
newbie psychics, we hit the astral plane. And the astral plane is full of tricksters and you know spirits of mischief, and they're parasitic, and they love to tell you to do stupid shit and then make you do it. Like, so I think assuming that just because you're channeling a spirit, you're channeling who I find this problem with channelers a lot. They just assume they're channeling who they think they are, and very often they're not.
Right. And I would imagine that takes practice too, to even, yeah,
It
yeah,
takes practice, and it takes raising your own frequency. Like, you have to be at a high enough frequency to pull in, or how to get to a high enough frequency. If you're in a bad state in your life, I always think it's not really great to do psychic development if your own mental health is shaky,
yeah,
or your own emotional health, like, or your own physical health. Like, work on strengthening your own self and, raising your vibe. And then like get lots of training, work with a reputable teacher. Don't just assume every guide that comes along is who they say they are, and that you should absolutely 100% follow their dictates. One of my students, she's like, my guides are telling me to do that, like move to this town and do this thing. And I'm like, do you want to?
do you
Like,
want
do
to?
you have a choice? You can say no to that assignment. You don't do everything, that some random person on the street walks by and tells you to do.
Right.
Like, make up your own mind about what you want. It's like a co-creation between us and our guides, a co-creation between the universe and us. We don't give up, we don't abdicate our will or our personal responsibility or our sovereignty. We need to have both.
Yeah, it is so fascinating. I've had conversations with people where they're like, yeah, so I was guided here. My guides told me to come and I'm moving and lifting up my life. And I'm like, huh.
Yeah.
Hey,
Why are you doing that? And
right?
who's your guides? Like, who told you to do that? And how do you know they are who they say they are? And how do
Right.
you know it's not just some part of you? Like a lot of times people will say, I'm talking to Archangel Michael, and I'm like, dude, that's your inner child throwing a fit. Or that's like some shadow aspect of yourself
Yeah.
that we project out and think we're talking to our guides, you know? Um,
And I
you
think
know,
this is
this
so
like lady, she was like, I went car shopping and I bought this really beautiful, expensive car that I can't afford. It's like hundreds of dollars more than I can afford because my guides, angels told me I needed this white, sparkly car. And if I bought the other car, I was going to be in a car accident. I was like, that's such bullshit. Your inner child picked that car. We do not let our inner child make big, expensive financial decisions. It's like she had an inner child fit and then blamed her spirit guides on it.
Oh my God, that's awesome. And now she has a car she can't afford.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. That is hysterical.
And her spirit guides were like, no, be financially responsible, you know?
Right? Oh my gosh. So as we wrap up, what are some things that people can do to actually maybe strengthen their intuition or their psychic abilities?
I think we need to take time every day to listen. And so that's hard, you know, because we're all so busy.
Yeah,
And maybe it means you have a meditation practice, or maybe it just means you spend 15 minutes with your journal with oracle cards. I'm a big fan of the psychic journal, and I created one called the Psychic Awakening Journal, because I feel like when we record our dreams, our card pulls, our first impressions, all the psychic things, you know, the signs and omens that happen around us, they're so ephemeral. In the moment, it's such a big deal, but 5 minutes later, you forgot about it if you didn't write it down, you know? And when we write it down, well, first of all, you'll be amazed how psychic you really are and already. And then we strengthen whatever we kind of put, whatever we're putting into that, our attention on, we strengthen. So psychic journal, deck of oracle cards, 15 minutes of quietness on a regular basis,
I
you
love
know,
that.
is a really good place to start.
I love that. I always love to ask, as I come to the end, what is something that you live by that you want to share with our listeners?
I live by, contrary to all the all the beefing that I just said, really, really believing that our intuition is how our soul speaks to us, you know. And if you want to live a soulful life, tuning into your intuition is a really, really good way. You know, as long as it's sort of blended with some common sense, to live a more soulful life, because your soul can't speak to your mind. It's speaking to your heart, to your intuition, to these other parts of you. And it's a really good guide if you want a richer life.
I love that. Oh, what a beautiful way to end. I love that. So at the end of every call, at the end of every podcast, I pull cards. I've already pulled them. So there's 3 cards in front of me. I'm gonna have you pull the foot. So left, center, and right.
Right.
Right. This is the Commander Ashta Leadership Activation. Time to evolve. Trust in your ability to guide others. What a beautiful card for you.
Beautiful. I'll take it.
The intuition, I mean, that is,
Yeah,
right?
I love it. Amazing.
The center card are the Lemurians, clairvoyance activated, psychic awareness, sensitivity, trust your intuition.
Cool.
I love how these are always in alignment with the conversation that I have.
Amazing.
And if you chose the left card for those listening, Therapist Bay, paradigm shift, activation to grow, make the necessary change.
He's
And
one of the super high level ascended masters.
okay, this is from the
Yeah.
Kyle Gray Divine Master Oracle card.
Cool. Love it.
So Lisa, we're going to put all your information in the show notes, but you have all your books, all that. They can go to your website and get
Yeah.
Amazon, I imagine, anything,
Yeah.
everything there. And you do
Yeah.
have an offering that a free offer that we'll put the link in there, and that's the energy management for empaths, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
Okay,
a really good little 4 hour video class on all those energy management fundamentals we were talking about.
perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much today. This has been so much fun.
Oh,
And those of you listening, thank you for joining on today's journey towards a more enlightened and fulfilling life. I hope that today's episode has inspired you to embrace your inner wisdom and navigate your path with a renewed sense of purpose. Remember, transformation begins from within. Take a moment each day to connect with your higher self and trust that the universe is guiding you towards your highest goal. And if you found today's episode valuable, please subscribe, download it, leave a review, and share this podcast with others who might benefit from our message. Your support helps us reach more souls on their spiritual journey. Stay connected with our community. Mine and Lisa's links will be in the show notes. And until next time, continue to shine your light and walk in peace. I am Francine Terrell, and this has been FN Fridays with Francine. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Francine. Thanks for having me on your podcast.